Welcome to the State of Financial Wellness for Hispanic Americans with the TIAA Institute. I am Fareeda Griffith, the Managing Director for the Coalition for Equity and Opportunity. To celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, we are recognizing the contributions and influences of Hispanic Americans to the nation's achievements, culture, and history. I am happy to be joined by Surya, Kolluri, head of TIAA Institute, and Professor David Musto of the Wharton School. Surya is recognized as a thought leader in retirement and healthy aging research and sits on the Wharton Pension Research Council and holds a MBA from the Wharton School. David is the Ronald O. Perlman Professor in Finance, the Director of the Stevens Center for Innovation and Finance, a member of the Wharton Coalition for Equity and Opportunity Faculty Advisory Board, and conceptualized the Finiverse app that we are going to discuss today, geared to serving under-resourced communities. Okay, so let's jump into this important conversation. Surya, can you share why the TIAA Institute is interested in and cares deeply about focusing on Hispanic communities? According to the TIAA Institute and Stanford's Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center annual PFIN Index Survey, Hispanics' personal finance knowledge is typically lower than the overall U.S. population. What are some factors that contribute to this disparity in financial literacy?
Fareeda, thank you so much on behalf of the TIAA Institute and all my colleagues at TIAA to join this conversation with you and Professor Musto. We became deeply interested in this topic. As you rightly mentioned, we focus on the topic of retirement and naturally, along with that, longevity. As we started studying the topic, particularly through the pandemic, we saw lots of disparities in how the longevity of folks between males and females, between different races and ethnicities. And then when you go to the Social Security Administration and start collecting data on Social Security income across these various demographic groups, you see a lot of disparity as well. So it's not a one-size-fits-all conversation. So we need to understand these different demographic groups deeply. And to your point, one of the areas that we have kind of done a lot of research is around retirement preparedness and financial preparedness. And if you ask then, why do we see these differences? I'm sure Professor Musto would agree with me. There are things like barriers, structural barriers, language barriers, access to education, access to healthcare. Maybe even in our study recently that we did on Hispanic and Hispanic financial wellness, maybe some cultural distrust elements. All these things lead to kind of a focus and understanding of what's happening with our Hispanic Latino population. And I'll close with this research point and return it back to you. So what we found in our research is about over 1/3 of Hispanic Americans were not able to answer more than 7 questions correctly in an administered questionnaire in assessing financial literacy. And that was double the rate of white Caucasian population. And then similarly, we also found that 38%, let's call it 4 in 10, had weak longevity literacy. And this is an important point I want to just make, which is if we look at longevity by demographic group, Hispanic Latino females are the second longest living in the US. And therefore, it would be troubling to say longevity literacy is low because then that population is incurring longevity risk, meaning they could outlive their savings. So these are all the reasons, Fareeda, why we care deeply about this topic and some of these findings.
Thank you so much for just highlighting those demographics and saying, there's not a one size fits all, because I think that's a really good point to make. And I do want to let the audience know that we will provide the link for the report by the TIAA Institute on the podcast website. So building on that work that TIAA Institute is doing regarding financial wellness for Hispanic Americans, David, can you share a bit more about what inspired the development of the Finiverse app? The app that high school interns at the Wharton Stevens Center for Innovation developed to determine the real cost of college, particularly and why it is important to involve high school students in its creation especially those from underrepresented groups like the Hispanic communities?
Oh, thanks, Fareeda. Thanks for having me. And well, first, why did we start this app? Two things to say. One is, well, the center launched 5 years ago, and right away we asked ourselves, well, what is a way we could reach out to the community, something that was grounded in finance scholarship, what academics do all day, and then what would be useful to the community. And student loans was the first thing that came to mind. Here's a huge financial decision you have to make before you've made maybe any other real financial decision or any one that really would come to mind. And so it's a big decision, and it's not only big, but it's multidimensional in a way that's kind of hard to wrap your mind around. You take out a loan, and then you go to school, and then good and bad things can happen, and you get the job, you don't get the job, all sorts of things can happen down the road, which, by the way, is why we called it Finiverse, because Finiverse, the idea was it's finance in the multiverse. That was the idea, that you take out a loan, you make a financial decision, and then all these universes, in some sense, branch out from this one, and you want to maybe take one fact from each of those universes that could happen and collect those and present them as a probability distribution, the diversity of things that could happen because you took out this loan. And then you look at that, you think about it, you ask yourself, you look at the risk and you ask yourself, well, is this right for me or not? And you could ask that about different schools that cost different amounts and different careers you could pursue and so on. So it's a way to take that unwieldy financial decision and make it a little more digestible. So that's one thing. And then the other is just to bring high school students to campus in exercise in entrepreneurship. It's an entrepreneurship in every way, except there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? Wharton's not charging for this. The students are supported. They're supported by a federal program called the Work Ready program. And so they actually get a little stipend for the campus. That's your tax dollars at good work, I believe. And they all come from, that's means tested, right? So they all come from lower income families. And anyhow, it's been a great time. This semester we have 81 high school students coming here Tuesday. So tomorrow's the first day. Tuesday evenings coming from some of them commute almost an hour to our campus, from Northeast, far away, to join us. And we have all these different teams and so on. It's just a lot of fun for all of us.
Thank you so much for just giving us a little bit of insight into this work. I think as I hear you talk, I hear access, I hear a conversation about why this is important and giving them tools, right? Practical tools that will have real life implications.
Yeah. Here's one the lowest hanging fruit of all is income driven repayment, which is a very generous federal program that shares a lot of the risk. If you swing for the fences, I want to do something and maybe it doesn't work out, it's very risky, hard job to get, or whatever, bad things can happen, which is part of why we made this app, is to sort of bring to you, the good things, bad things can happen. But with income-driven repayment, a lot of the downside is borne through this federal program. And because it is, that's one more reason to take that risk, right? But if you don't know that in advance, then it has no effect on the risk you take. You don't know about it in advance. It doesn't affect your decision. And we've learned in our interaction with high schools, very few high school students know anything about income-driven repayment. You might ask a room full of kids, even at a magnet school here in Philly that attracts very ambitious students, and maybe, 2 hands go up that they know what it is. And so just that's the lowest hanging fruit of all, just to show people income-driven repayment and show how it's going to affect their repayment going forward.
So can we build on that a bit and talk a bit about the work that the TIAA Institute is doing to think about financial wellness for Hispanic Americans? So as I think about the work that Surya and his team is doing, the report found that roughly 5% less incidence of student loan debt is taken by Hispanic Americans. So that is on average about $15,000. But amount of student loan does not equate to a higher number of liquid assets. And so, Surya, I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about how Hispanic Americans are managing to enter adulthood with less student loan debt, but we're not seeing any information that kind of gives us a insight into whether or not we see higher liquid assets.
It's a perplexing finding indeed. But I did want to say that the app that David described is such a leap forward into this improving of this financial literacy through a practical application that I'm pretty excited to hear about this and wish great success in its rollout. On this question, Fareeda, about loans, I think as I think about this finding, maybe we can discuss the what as opposed to the why. The why is going to take a little more research. But here are a couple of guesses. One is, and as an Asian American, I can kind of relate to this propensity that parents are very invested in the education of their next generation, and maybe even them taking on loans or home equity loans and paying it forward rather than shifting the burden to the kids. I can, in my own family, in a larger family, I can think of those kind of incidences where parents taking on home equity loans or withdrawing money, God forbid, from their 401k plans, et cetera, to fund education. So that's one explanation. The second is maybe the choice of schools. And I'm just completely relating to this based on some of the focus group work we were doing for this research, that almost every single incidence, there was a focus on education, but the emphasis was on community colleges, state schools, rather than the more expensive private schools. So there could be a couple of those. And then finally, if you also, another way to ask the question is, what proportion of the population is going for higher education versus the broader population? All those could be factors feeding into this perplexing finding, I think.
Thank you for that insight. And I just wanted also to highlight, as a sociologist, I'm happy to hear that you have the survey data, but you're also doing the focus group to kind of get the in-depth data around what also could be factors contributing to that. So thank you so much.
Fareeda, one small point there is, when we run surveys, at some point, the data set becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, that it's no longer statistically valid to say, for example, young Hispanic Latino females living in the rural areas. I mean, you're so far down that you're not going to have a sample to be able to do that. So you want to add some color commentary to that with dialogue, discussions, and focus groups.
Let's continue this conversation, David, about student loans. Unfortunately, student loans is a significant burden for many young adults. What impact do you think Philadelphia high school students from underrepresented groups in designing this app has on its development? And can you discuss a little bit about how the Finiverse app aims to help high school students understand the real costs and risk associated with higher education financing?
Okay, so a couple of things to say. We bring high school students to campus and they learn entrepreneurship, they learn coding, they learn the UI, UX, everything that goes into an app, which is, good for them. It's also good for the app because the app is designed for students like them. It's designed for high school students for whom college is something they're considering, and to engage those students, to bring them through the app to the point where they can digest the information that we are providing. That is crucial, right? So people can go through all this, but if after we do all these simulations, people look at the result and they don't really internalize it, then we haven't achieved our goal. That we have these students are designing something for people like themselves, and they socialize a lot. They go back to their school. They have people try it out. We go to these schools all the time. I was just at a Philly high school just this morning, and we're actually visiting the Community College of Philadelphia next week, and so we are always reaching out, just fine tuning it so that it will be, it will serve the needs that people actually have. And I should add also that one thing that we see this app doing as an assist to our school counselors, right? When our school counselors, which, a typical school counselor might have, I think, about 400 students an average. I think it's about the ratio of students to counselors, like 400 to 1. And that's a tough job. And to make you more, to help you be able to answer the questions, when someone walks in the door and say, I'm thinking about the school, I'm thinking about this major, I'm thinking about pursuing this line of work, to be able to show some hard numbers, the hardest numbers we can come up with, I think should be, I hope, a good assist to these, overworked, teachers.
What do you find in terms of, if I think about, today's technology, you can use them pretty intuitively and quickly without a lot of training. So what is your finding with the app here, with teachers, counselors, and students being able to use it intuitively?
Over time, we're trying to socialize it sort of further and further beyond, to people who are more and more strangers to us. The goal is that a total stranger can pick it up and just plow right through it and get right to the end and get get all the benefit from it. We are making more progress to that goal all the time. I would say that if you look at it, by the way, you can go to Finiverse.org. That's the website. You'll go there right now. You can see that the students have built, I believe, a very nice user interface that brings you through it in a way that doesn't demand too much from you and gives you, I think, rewards. Here's another reward you get right away, which is the net cost of colleges. The net cost can be very different from the sticker price. Penn's a good example. The net cost for many students is actually zero. And in general, it's low. And you see, if you see the sticker price of 80,000 or whatever, I think it's more than 80,000 now, whatever it is, a huge number, you might just look at that and, forget it. That's crazy talk, right? But right away, the app shows you the median sticker price students actually pay. And then you can go, of course, further and say, well, given your financial circumstances, you can learn that, in fact, maybe it's zero. And I should add, while I'm saying that we've designed it very carefully so that we're not storing anything you put in. So there's no privacy issue here, right? So don't worry about that, because I know this is private. You put in family resources, that's private, but we're not storing that or anything like that. So
the point you're making is a direct connection to the focus group I was describing, where the parents were talking automatically about community colleges and state schools, thinking about the sticker price for private schools, whereas if they were educated through the Finiverse, they would be thinking about net cost, not sticker price.
Yeah, there's that. Though I don't want to throw water on the two-year schools, and that's one thing that's sort of our next goal is to fold in two-year schools to the choice set, because that certainly can be an affordable way to, here in Philadelphia, go to CCP, Community College of Philadelphia, get the two-year degree, and then transfer into Penn State, and now you've spent a whole lot less money.
The point being that they have the access to the full range of options.
Yes, I say at the moment it's only the four-year schools, but we're expanding it to the two-year schools too.
David, one of the things as I hear you say is this information could really be life-changing for individuals because it opens up options that may not have been at reach for individuals who maybe, as you say, college is something that is on their radar, but what type of college and where that college is that aligns with the goals of what they're trying to do may broaden that. And so I think that work is really, really important. And also thinking about how can we make sure we include different types of institutions to make sure we have as many individuals using this app. And by the way, we will have that link for the app as well on our website.
Okay.
Surya, let's change the conversation from student loans now to thinking about Hispanic Henrys. And Henrys is an acronym, but it stands for High Earners But Not Yet Rich. The study of the report by the TIAA Institute found that over 90% of Hispanic Henrys want to grow their wealth by investing and diversifying their income streams. Are there any new opportunities available to Hispanics based on those findings? And what's prompting this change in mindset in comparison to their parents' generation?
It's a great question. It's a fast-growing population and an equally fast-growing GDP. If you were just to do a GDP assessment of this demographic group, and so what we learned from this focus group of this high earners but not yet rich group is that they really want to shift from, and this I think is interesting, work for your money, quote unquote, mindset that they saw their earlier generations, parents, grandparents have, to make money work for you. So we found that interesting shift in mindset with this group that we're discussing to enjoy the fruits of labor, hard work, enable a better living standard, take care of the future generations, etc. And family tends to be kind of the top focus. 40% of the group that we surveyed ranked it as number one, more than even meaningful career actualization, those kinds of goals. And I think while there's an opportunity for Hispanic individuals themselves, even within this group, to seek education advice, we think, and this is where I get excited, that there's an opportunity for financial professionals who are serving and providing advice and financial guidance to adjust their approach. So I'm in the business of talking to financial advisors day in and day out, and providing this change in mindset is pretty exciting to meet their Hispanic clients where they are, and multi-generational considerations. And this is a favorite of mine, resistance to jargon. The financial services industry is like jargon-laden. So can you simplify it and speak in a way that people can relate to, address this lack of trust that financial institutions might have. All those adjustments, if a financial professional can make, they can meet where this demographic group, important and growing demographic group lives, and provide the requisite guidance and advice.
Can we talk a little bit more about the role of trust in kind of understanding the state of financial wellness for Hispanic Americans? Particularly, the report found in the quote, "do it with me," end quote, model of financial advice that is integral to overcoming distrust of financial institutions in the Hispanic community. Can you explain more about that model and then how it can help build trust and decrease financial disparities within the Hispanic community?
Just make a couple of points here. Even though there's a shift in mindset I was describing, make money work for me, there's still, our research is showing some scars left from previous generations from a distrust in the room when we engaged in these focus groups. So when we asked, what kind of investments would you want to be making by way of what their interests are, mutual funds came up to the fore, real estate. I was surprised 529s came up too. And those tend to be like a bit esoteric in a general conversation, but they did come up as a preferred investment class. And they also expressed a desire to be partners in making financial decisions, not just like hand them, here's what you should do checklist, but rather wanting to partner and be educated on the options and the considerations, not just be told what to do. And to reiterate my point earlier that I made about jargon, kind of be educated and informed in simple language so that all of this advice is accessible to them.
Yeah, that's really important. I wanted to also go back to something that David talked about in terms of the role that the Finiverse app is doing, and then the adaptations and expansions that you're doing within the app, particularly around adding to now making sure you have information for community colleges. Are there plans to also to do any other expansions within the app as it relates to young adult financial planning space?
Well, a couple of things. One is that one new module we're developing for the app is answering questions about what does it mean to major in this subject? What doors am I opening, and what doors am I opening, less by majoring in this versus that? Just a little anecdote. My father eventually ended up in medical school. What did he major in? He majored in classics, right? Greek and Latin. If you look across, I have a friend who teaches at Wesleyan as a philosophy professor. And he said, the philosophy majors here get the highest scores on the LSATs, and they tend to become lawyers. And so there are, when majoring in one thing versus another, doesn't necessarily mean what you think it does. It doesn't close off, so many doors as you might think. College can be, you can explore a lot of things in college and then pursue what you're interested in within reason. You want to know what are the numbers, right? What are the facts? And so that's one thing. We've partnered with Revelio Labs, which is letting us use their data that tracks people over time. You can see what school they went to, what they majored in, and then what they did right after college. And then what were they doing 10 years later? And so, for someone who's just sort of backing up from the whole financial question, just saying, well, should I go to college or not? And what does it mean to go to college? And what does it mean to go to this college versus that college, or major in this versus that? Well, you want to see the numbers. You want to see the numbers presented to you in a way you can look, aha, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Now I'm seeing how people's lives, evolve through college and after. And that's going to help me make this, help me choose the right, beginning point for myself. And
Mm-hmm.
then, I can see the diversity of things that could happen later. So that's one thing we're working on right now. Lots of different ways you can go with financial decision making. You could take it to mortgages, for example, and help. Other kind of low hanging fruit is these days, of course, mortgage rates are higher than they were a few years ago, mm-hmm. and a lot of people might be tempted to accept a big prepayment penalty on their mortgage to get the rate lowered. And say, well, okay, you can do that. I can see why you might do that. But that's actually a big money maker for the lender, right? Because they're sort of taking away a lot of your ability to refinance to a lower rate if rates go down. And, someone who's just buying their first house, they may have no
Mm-hmm.
idea that, you've just, given up a lot of your right to enjoy, other people are going to get the new lower rate when it goes down. You're not going to. And this same kind of simulation kind of app could help people wrap their minds around that sort of probabilistic sort of arbitrage. I don't know if that's a right word, but that might be the easiest way to see it, what you're giving up by doing this and how people are making money off you.
I think you're making a good point too, because you think you're making a financial decision now. It's really important to maybe think about, when you make that decision, what the future holds and what, if you're making the right decision, what that entails. And so I really appreciate that you and your team are doing that work to help individuals who may have some of the information, but not all of it. So it's in a nice little package for them in the app. And you're thinking about ways in which you can build on that. And so I think that's a really important contribution to this whole notion of understanding kind of financial literacy. So thank you. I want to welcome both of you the opportunity to share some challenges that Hispanic and other racial and ethnic minorities experience that contribute to this economic disparities. Both initiatives, both the Finiverse and the report from the TIAA Institute, emphasize the importance of financial literacy among younger and underrepresented populations. So how critical is early financial education in closing the wealth gap, and what strategies have proven most effective?
So we brought up the question of trust before, and I'm not an expert on other people, other ethnic minorities, but I can say that in general, trust is a big driver of how people within an affinity group will make a decision, right? The days of everyone going down to the same bank and getting their loan or whatever those are completely over. These days, why do you go to a particular mortgage broker or other financial service provider? It's going to be from your affinity group, people that you trust. And that's, of course, a great way to get the word out about a good product. Of course, it's a great way to get taken advantage of too, right? Mm-hmm. We all know Bernie Madoff, took tremendous advantage of his affinity group, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to be careful. But I think that sort of understand that's how a lot of financial decisions will be made. Some financial institutions have really reached out to immigrant community. One bank, I'll just toss this one because it keeps coming up again, is U.S. Bank, has been brought up to us again as a bank that's really made an effort to reach out to immigrant communities and engage and educate, and then that ultimately for them will be the gift that keeps on giving, because good word is going to spread. So yeah, that I think you think about it. Trust is going to be how these decisions are made, and of course you got to be careful about who you trust.
I really love the point that David made about trust. We've talked about it through this conversation. So let me add a couple of others. One is, I think particularly with this demographic group, worth having a kind of more of a holistic perspective and a holistic conversation. It's one thing to say, okay, here's your money is growing with all these smart investments, but taking into account family considerations, intergenerational considerations, family goals. I mean, that's come through as such a through line in our research that the emphasis on family, I think, is going to be very kind of a trust building exercise. That's one point. The second, I've already made this point before, keeping the language simple and everyday language to connect in the conversation is going to be important. And then thirdly, to emphasize the collaborative aspect, not here's what you should do, here's a checklist, but rather let's work on it together. Those three things, I think, are kind of the factors that could contribute to this trust building with the Hispanic community and ensuring their financial wellness.
I'll just add just one more thing to that, which is that one stylized fact about a lot of immigrant communities is that you have many generations under one roof. And that is sort of a positive and a, can be a risk in some situations. A positive, naturally, because as an older person, you have the support of your kids and the whole family, and that's obviously a huge help. It does make it potentially hard to save for the long run, though, with all those demands on your wealth from different generations. It can be a little hard to put money away, for yourself, for your own retirement, when you have so many other demands on it. So it can be a little hard to get the benefits. So, we will always talk about the magic of compound interest. Well, that magic only comes when you leave it alone for a long time, and leaving it alone can be just a bigger challenge potentially in that context.
Thank you both for just highlighting that piece about trust again, but then also, and going back to something Surya said earlier as well about longevity. If we think about this particular population, they are living longer, right? And then we were waiting, possibly thinking about the ways in which they saved it earlier on. If they have that information, they have that knowledge, it could really be great returns on their investment. But having that knowledge is going to be really key. And I think both the report as well as the app will really provide that those educational tools for Hispanic Americans. So I have one final closing question for both of you. Wharton CEO Primary's mission is to provide resources to individuals and organizations that historically do not have access to the Wharton resources to overall impact the wealth gap. What action-oriented programs or initiatives can organizations and individuals support and or create to address the country's most pressing socioeconomic challenges?
Well, let me just toss in, so we have these high school students coming, and for us, I'm a finance professor, that's my discipline, and so when I think about entrepreneurship to do with high school students, it's going to be in the finance realm. But I think just in general, bringing young people to see, how do you execute on an idea? How do you turn sort of a pipe dream into logical steps, work through them, build it, and then and have a working product? I think that is people learn those skills. They learn how to execute. That's just going to be tremendously valuable to them in the future. So I know that Wharton has a lot of focus on entrepreneurship. It's not us. It's a lot of different, and also not just Wharton. It's engineering out throughout the university. There's a lot of interest in spreading entrepreneurship skills to the community, and I think that's a gift that keeps on giving.
I'd like to add one additional positive influencer in this conversation. So we've talked about teachers, we've talked about counselors, I talked about financial professionals, all very important. But let me add a fourth, employers.
Yes.
If you think about the role in fact, some of the research that we show indicate that employees trust their employers when they provide them benefits and other things. And particularly in these different demographic groups, the trust levels are higher with employers. So one can imagine working through the employers to communicate and provide this education, leveraging that trust. And a simple example is if there's a matching grant that the employer is providing the employee, then providing them guidance to maximize their contribution so that they get the maximum match, otherwise free money is left on the table, is a very simple example. But the role of an employer to provide that guidance could also be emphasized. So let's add 2 teachers, 2 financial counselors, 2 financial professionals. Let's also add employers.
So it seems, in hearing both of you talk, it seems that this is multi-layered. Individuals from different parts of the journey, whether it be a teacher, whether or not once you finish school, you're now employed, and so the employer plays an important role. I just want to thank you both so much for your insight and your just shedding light on the financial well-being, particularly with a particular focus on Hispanic Americans. We will add the links for our audience, and so they can download the Finiverse app and to read the report produced by the TIAA Institute. The Wharton Coalition for Equity and Opportunity remains committed to elevating the work that our faculty and partners do to enrich the lives of others, as well as serving as a go-to resource for evidence-based solutions to the problems of inequity and access. Thank you so much.